Joshua Buatsi knocks out Ricards Bolotniks in the 11th round. Beforehand, this was being touted as the perfect learning fight for Joshua Buatsi at this stage of his career. And that's exactly what it turned out to be. This was actually very, very good matchmaking because the opponent was sufficiently tough and challenging to bring Buatsi along and allow him to learn, but not to the extent that he took too much damage or indeed lost the fight. But what I saw here makes me cautious about putting Buatsi in with Bivol in his next fight or anybody else for a world title. Virgil Hunter also seems circumspect. I'm not sure why Eddie Hearn is in such a rush, but maybe we'll come to that later on. Now, as far as the fight itself, Bolotniks won the opening round. He was counter-punching very well. He was finding gaps in Buatsi's defense as Buatsi came forward. And based upon that session, it looked like being a long night for Joshua Buatsi. In the second round, Buatsi had more success establishing his jab, getting some shots off. As the fight progressed, certainly by the time the fourth round came about, Buatsi seemed in command, although he was having to fight for every moment in there at times because Bolotniks was very game, he was very sneaky, he was landing shots to the head, shots to the body. Andy Lee was picking up on this all the way through the fight. I thought that Mike Costello was a little biased, I have to be honest. Whereas Andy Lee kept righting the ship and saying, no, Bolotniks is actually doing some good work in here and Buatsi's not having it all his own way. With that being said, I do feel as though Buatsi won the vast majority of the early rounds. I want to say from the first to the sixth. How many rounds could you really give Bolotniks? 2 at most. And in that 6th round, Buatsi managed to drop Bolotniks. It looked as though he might be able to close the show. He certainly felt like he could. He went in there and he basically punched himself out trying to end the fight. Bolotniks was able to survive. Then in the 7th round, Buatsi didn't have much gas in the tank. But because Bolotniks had taken a fair amount of punishment himself, because Buatsi had constantly been pressuring him, Bolotniks really didn't have that much in his tank to be able to come back at Buatsi the way I'm sure he wanted to, the way I'm sure his corner wanted him to. He tried to come at Buatsi, but not with that much intensity. So Buatsi was able to, I don't want to say weather the storm because it wasn't really a storm, but he was able to regroup, get his second wind, then later on in the fight start pressing the action again, and he eventually was able to get Bolotniks out of there in the 11th round with a great right hand, which Bolotniks just did not see coming, and he didn't have the energy at that time to be able to get out of the way quick enough. So he caught the full brunt of that right hand, and Buatsi, as we've seen over his past few fights, is becoming somewhat of a knockout artist because he's scored some spectacular KOs now. These are not exactly elite level opposition, the people he's fighting, but they're still game guys. They're still guys who are in good shape and come to win, and he's scoring some very good knockouts. Now, from a technical point of view, Buatsi is still very upright. Very little head movement there. That's something I hope that himself and his trainer Virgil Hunter can address, because that's something that Bolotniks was able to take advantage of. Now, after a few rounds, Buatsi did start to read what Bolotniks was doing. So, for example, Bolotniks was catching Buatsi early on with left hooks. Buatsi was then able to start timing it, reading it, and blocking the left hooks as the fight progressed. The same with the overhand rights. However, a guy as upright as Buatsi is going to need to do more than just what he did against Bolotniks to avoid getting hit when he's fighting a Dmitry Bivol, an Artur Beterbiev, even somebody like Joe Smith Jr., right? So he needs to address that very rigid upright stance, get some more movement, move his head off center line, and so forth. Also, Buatsi does have the ability to switch gears and up his pace, but a lot of the time he's quite methodical. And I know that's his style and everything. I mean, Gennady Golovkin, for example, is very methodical. But I just feel as though they could make Buatsi a little more dynamic during the course of regular action, rather than this very deliberate kind of plodding approach that he has. It's only when he hurts a guy that he tends to really up the pace and switch gears up. I feel like he needs to loosen up a little bit or something. Just inject a bit of, what's the word I'm looking for? Unpredictability into what he's doing. Also, I feel like one of the little things he could have done in this fight, which would have allowed him to maybe control Bolotniks a bit better, would have been more jabs to the body. He was going to the body with hooks, and that was all very good because that took the wind out of Bolotniks' sails. But I feel like the jab to the body would have allowed Buatsi to establish distance better. It would have allowed him to also take the wind out of Bolotniks' sail. And at the same time, it would have stopped Bolotniks' forward momentum. That is a punch, for example, which I'm sure many of you have seen Floyd Mayweather utilize to very good effect. Bolotniks was throwing the right counter over the top, so some of you are going to say, how's Buatsi going to throw jabs to the body when that punch was going to be coming at him? Well, the thing he needed to do, in my view, is feint to the head first and then jab to the body. You feint to the head first because his jab to the head was working very well. It was busting Bolotniks up. So Bolotniks had every reason to fear that punch or to try and avoid that punch, to be cautious of that punch. So you feint to the head first and then you stab to the body. And in that way, you can control a fight without having to, constantly land accurate jabs to the head. Because when you're jabbing to the head, of course, the opponent can block it with the gloves more easily. But it's not to say I'm advocating for him to abandon the jab to the head. No, but to use both, to go upstairs and downstairs. It's just when you're trying to land that jab to the body, it's sometimes a good idea to feint to the head first. Also, I'd like to see him try and maybe tweak that right hand a bit, because at long range and even at close and mid range, he was usually looping the right hand. I'd like to see more straight right hands at long range, and for him to develop and work on that punch whereby he can throw it off the jab in such a way that it gets maximum distance on it. Like the way, Deontay Wilder, Vladimir Klitschko, they're able to throw their right hand, keep distance on it, throw it in such a way that a shorter opponent like Bolotniks finds it difficult to counter it, you see? And that's all about positioning your legs in the right way, positioning your upper body in the right way, and getting maximum extension on the right hand, particularly off a strong jab where you got the guy in position first, then you throw the right hand after it. Buatsi does tend to square his shoulders up quite a bit. At mid and close range, that's not so much of an issue because, of course, he's looking for the hooks and the uppercuts. But at long range, don't really like seeing that. Like to see him try and stay more side on at long range. Now, after that big 6th round where he tried to get Bolotniks out of there and punched himself out, Buatsi was taking long stretches of rounds off for several sessions after that. I noticed that he would try and box or just stay out of the way and take minimal damage in the first half of the round. Then he would step on the gas in the second half of the round. And when Buatsi pressed forward, it was really night and day compared to when he was moving about and allowing Bolotniks to come at him. Bolotniks really could not fight, certainly not against Buatsi, on the back foot very effectively at all. So whenever Buatsi did put his foot on the gas, he was able to get Bolotniks under control really quickly. As I say, there were several rounds there where Buatsi was moving about. Bolotniks was able to come forward and build up momentum. But as soon as Buatsi flicked that switch and decided to start coming forward, all of a sudden he was having all the success, landing good shots and putting damage on Bolotniks. So you do wonder whether he could have actually bluffed his way through half a round on the front foot rather than moving about and allowing Bolotniks to have momentum, whether he could have actually gone forward without expending too much energy, without throwing too many shots, but just used his size and positioning to repel Bolotniks' momentum, keep him on the back foot, and also keep him under pressure. I mean, you could tell from as early as the 2nd or 3rd round that Bolotniks was starting to look a little, I don't want to say tired, but he was looking a little anxious under Buatsi's sustained pressure. So, maybe that will come with time, and I've seen people criticize Buatsi's, what do you want to call it, stamina management, for lack of a better term. And I think that's fair. But again, these things come with experience. You learn how to pace yourself for a 12-round bout a lot more effectively the more times you've been in these kind of fights. Buatsi is a natural finisher. He's a guy who, when he has you hurt, he's going to go for it. We've seen that throughout his career so far. So you don't want to take that away from Buatsi. You don't want to make him so circumspect and so steady in his pace that you take that element of his game away from him. But I guess he has to learn how to read a fight a little bit better, or read an opponent a little bit better. Virgil Hunter, after that 6th round, told him that he rushed the shots, wasting energy in doing so, and that's what allowed Bolotniks to make it through the round. Once you gain a certain level of seasoning, you can handle situations like that more efficiently. But as I said at the start, this was, in my opinion, the perfect learning fight for Buatsi. He'll come on a lot from this. I agree with Virgil Hunter that Buatsi needs some more development. Not sure why Eddie Hearn seems in a rush. Personally, I'd like to see him have maybe 2 or 3 more fights before challenging for a world title. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Would you like to see him go in there against Dimitri Bivol next? Or do you, like me, and seemingly like his trainer Virgil Hunter, think he needs a little bit more seasoning before that? Drop your comments in the comments section below. And before I go, just to answer the poll that I did the other day, about, I think it's 85% of you were correct, and about 15% of you were incorrect. There is no way that Hatman supports any of that knee-bending nonsense. So I'm glad that the majority of my subscribers know me well enough to realize that. Anyway, catch you guys on the next one. I'm out. Come and join me on Patreon and access my weekly no-holds-barred, censorship-free podcast where we lift the lid on a wide range of controversial topics. It's not mainstream friendly, it's not politically correct, but that's the whole point. We dare to stand as a beacon of reason against an army of insanity. Just head on over to my Patreon page and select the tier called Hatman Hot Topics. You'll gain access to a minimum of 2 hours of exclusive content every single week, including podcasts, videos, interviews, live stream Q&A sessions, as well as my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. Not to mention a vast back catalog of hundreds of hours of previous episodes. You can listen via the Patreon app with the option to download in high quality MP3. We've also got a Discord server where you can come and chat and hang out with myself and other members. There's no contract, no commitment, and you can cancel at any time. So come and join our community of free and critical thinkers by signing up with me here on Patreon today.